The rate of crime has increased so much around the world that even the most dangerous criminals, like on death row, do not make it to the news. There are still so many criminals on death row that can never be allowed to let out. So without waiting any further, let's get to the video. Before we start, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and hit the like button so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. That being said, let's dive in. Number 1. Andre Thomas. In 2005, in rural northeastern Texas, Andre Thomas, then in his early 20s, was convicted of the murder of his ex-wife and 2 young children and was sentenced to death, killing his victims with separate knives. He claimed he did not want to contaminate their blood and allow the demons inside them to live. While his behavior was horrific and bizarre, what distinguishes Thomas is what he did next. After being taken into custody, he removed one of his own eyes. Despite this self-mutilation and the opinions of several psychologists who thought he suffered from schizophrenia, he was ruled to be sane enough to stand trial. One doctor said his act was the result of psychosis from substance abuse, not mental illness. He was convicted and sentenced to death in 2005. 3 years later, in 2008, after failing to commit suicide, he removed his other eye and ate it, inducing total blindness. His appeals currently ride on a debate about Thomas's mental illness to be executed. Number 2. John Familaro. On June 2, 1991, 23-year-old Denise Huber attended a Morrissey concert in Los Angeles. She was last seen by friends when she left a Long Beach bar in the early morning, intent on driving to her parents' home, where she also lived. The next morning, her parents discovered that she had not come home, and they notified police. A friend found Denise's disabled car on a nearby Orange County freeway, the battery drained by emergency flashers that were activated the night before. For 3 years, police and her parents had no idea what happened to Denise. On July 13, 1994, a woman in residence in Prescott, Arizona, sought to purchase paint from a man named John Familaro. While picking up the paint, she noticed a rental truck parked in the rear of the driveway that clearly had been there for some time and looked suspicious. She took down the license plate number and had the sheriff's department run it. The plate came back as stolen from Orange County, California. When a deputy knocked on Familaro's front door and got no answer, he noticed an electrical cord running to a freezer in the truck. Thinking that he had stumbled on a mobile drug lab, the deputy got a locksmith to open the back of the truck. When he lifted the lid, he found the body of a young female, naked, handcuffed, and wrapped in garbage bags. It turned out to be Denise Huber. Familaro likely kidnapped Denise from the freeway and then took her to his deserted warehouse business location where he raped and killed her. Denise's skull was badly battered. Familaro was convicted and sentenced to death in 1997. He currently resides on death row in California. Number 3. Richard Farley. From the moment that Richard Farley met his co-worker Laura Black in 1984, he became immediately obsessed with her. They both worked for a Silicon Valley technology firm. Farley began to pester her for dates. She politely refused. He started to leave letters and gifts, drive by her home, and follow her to the gym. He harassed her at the office and on the street, becoming more and more threatening. Farley was terminated by the company in 1986, but continued to stalk Black until she got a temporary restraining order. On February 16, 1988, facing foreclosure, on the day before a hearing to make the restraining order permanent, Farley drove his motorhome to his former company armed, indiscriminately killing anyone he encountered with a shotgun and other firearms. When he got to Laura Black's office, she slammed the door in his face. He blew it off its hinges and fired, hitting her in the shoulder and puncturing one of her legs. He shot and killed 4 employees and wounded others. Black survived, but in the end, 7 people had been killed. Farley was convicted and sentenced to death on January 17, 1992. He is still on death row at San Quentin, California. Number 4. George Emil Banks. In 1982, George Emil Banks was an ex-convict and Pennsylvania prison guard. Because of erratic and violent behavior, he was placed on leave and subjected to a mental health evaluation. A few weeks later, after an evening at a party, Banks used an assault rifle to kill 8 people in his own home, including 3 women who were the mothers of his children, and 5 children, 4 of them his. Outside, he shot 2 neighbors, killing 1. He then went to another girlfriend's trailer and killed her, his son by her, his girlfriend's mother, and his girlfriend's nephew. He shot his girlfriend's brothers, but they survived. After a standoff, Banks surrendered. He was charged with 13 murders. In explanation, he told the police he did not want his children, who were biracial, to be victimized in a race war. Banks incoherently testified at his own trial and claimed that the police killed his victims during the spree. He had only wounded them. This despite the fact that he shot at least some of his children in the head at point-blank range. Banks was convicted guilty but ultimately declared not mentally competent for execution. However, despite his age, Banks is still considered dangerous enough to be housed in Pennsylvania's death penalty unit. Number 5. Joseph Edward Duncan III. Joseph Duncan is a convicted murderer and sex offender. In Coeur d'Alene in May 2005, he saw an 8-year-old girl playing in her family's yard as he was driving and decided to attack. He stormed the remote house and bludgeoned the mother, Brenda, her boyfriend, and 13-year-old son, Slade, to death. He kidnapped her young children, Dylan 9 and Shasta 8, who were the true object of his home invasion. Duncan drove the children to Montana. There he repeatedly molested both victims, filming himself on a camcorder and eventually killing Dylan. He was arrested weeks later, in July, when he and Shasta were spotted in a Coeur d'Alene restaurant. During his trial, the court offered therapy and counseling for jurors after witnessing behavior and video footage that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Duncan pleaded guilty to everything. They sentenced him to death after approximately 3 hours of deliberation. He is currently housed in the federal death row facility in Terre Haute, Indiana. What are your thoughts on these criminals? Share in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.